Hey, welcome back to the Who Dat Jedi podcast. And sitting around my table, as always, in the heart of Gentilly is Dave and Fredo. Everybody say hi.
Hello.
Hi.
And my name is Aaron. We're going to be, our last episode, we did a lot of talking about the Rise of Skywalker, and we're going to continue that tonight. And we're going to be kind of talking about a little bit about old Sheev himself. We were just talking about how Palpatine got his first name, and Sheev is just kind of a dumb name.
It's a weird name.
That's old man Swoboda, talking about Star Wars. It's like some of these names are just kind of dumb. It's like names of planets, they just get kind of dumb.
I love that once that name got established as being canon, it started appearing everywhere. Everyone started referring to him as a Sheev.
Well, you know what? Back in my day, it wasn't Palpatine. It was the Emperor. Palpatine came to be just in some book that was written after that as well. So
was that the same thing that happened to Anakin? Well, because Anakin, that's his name.
Anakin's name is dropped in Return of the Jedi.
Right. But where did he know? And I know that comes from the original script when it was Anakin, Starkiller of some kind.
So, I don't know.
And it was weird.
We need to get George Lucas on this podcast. If we offer him beer, maybe he'd join us, Anyway, so we'll be talking about that. We're also going to be talking about things that maybe were kind of hyped in the marketing and kind of hyped in, some of the panels that they did at Comic-Con. I guess they didn't do it at Comic-Con, but D23 and at Celebration that maybe didn't pay off or did pay off, or could they have paid off a little bit better? I don't know. So we're going to be talking about those things. So it's basically just three guys rambling about Star Wars and drinking beer. But Fredo's not drinking beer. He's drinking Diet Coke. So he's the designated driver tonight.
Trying to go clean for January.
There you go. That's tough because we're in playoffs and Carnival starts in about, 3 days now or 4 days?
Officially, Carnival starts January 6th. So yeah, but the parade season doesn't really start till about February 8th with Crew de Vue. So
look at you. You planned well.
That's look, Super Bowl, Crew de Vue, then we're into Mardi Gras. That's serious drinking season. So, got to save the liver some kind of way.
we sound like we have problems here. But anyway, as always, we start off with some Star Wars Saga trivia. And I don't think any one of us has missed a question yet, right?
I missed one like the very first go around. I mixed up Logray and Chief Chirpa.
Oh.
And I couldn't remember the Camino ones.
And I don't know if I mentioned it on air, the last one. I've actually shared a beer with the guy who played Logray. I did mention that. That's because I was talking about Admiral Oz on Admiral Piet. Yep. Mm-hmm. That was kind of fun. We both drank Bud Light. So that was back in my bad beer drinking days. So I've since fixed that problem. Yeah. So, all right, I'm going to start this one off, and this will go to Fredo. Let's see here. What building is sufficiently forbidding to prompt C-3PO to ask, "Are you sure this is the right place?" Let people think about it.
And I gotta give people at least a moment to visualize when it happened. And the answer, I would imagine, is Jabba's palace.
It is Jabba's palace. It is.
Which I always wonder, it's like, okay, the right address. Is there an address book on Tatooine? And how do you mix up Jabba's palace? Like if you're delivering, like if you're Amazon delivery guy and you're dropping off a package there versus across the street. Yeah, that doesn't happen.
I feel like Obi-Wan Kenobi's house is like next door to Jabba's palace or something.
And your next door neighbor, he's the one stealing all your Christmas packages. Okay, Dave. What Imperial officer? I'm gonna try to bring it all in right now. What Imperial officer quietly expresses his disdain for the bounty hunters entertained by Lord Vader?
I think that's Admiral Piet.
That's right.
It is.
And he says, "Bounty hunters, we don't need that type of scum."
And the best line that ever in like most Star Wars movies, that's the response when he says, "Bounty hunters, we don't need their scum," and the one guy goes, "Yes, sir." It's just
that's perfect.
It's just it's just a total throwaway line that is just like it's just funny as all hell because it's like the boss says we don't need their scum. Yeah, you're right.
The older I got, the more I appreciated that as I started working.
I never noticed this in a podcast pointed out. Actually, it was the Star Wars Underworld podcast pointed it out. when they were going through, they were just doing a live reaction to, they're watching Empire Strikes Back and just, they're having a conversation about the movie, which maybe we can steal that idea one day, just watching a movie and just having a conversation about it. But it's when at the very end of Empire, when, they make their way into hyperspace and Vader, first, I always loved how Vader looks out the window, and then he looks over his shoulder, and then he looks back out the window. I mean, he's wearing a mask, but he has that, what the hell? And then as he walks out of the bridge, there's one guy right by the door. He's like looking at his data pad, and as Vader walks by him, then he just kind of looks over his shoulder. I mean, it's just one of those things like, oh,
everybody's like, oh, shoot.
Yeah, is he gone? It's just kind of funny. And it gets into what Irvin Kershner said. He goes, he needed humor in that movie without gags. So some of those throwaway lines were just kind of, and those reactions were kind of funny. So I digress. Dave, ask me a question.
All right. So this card, I get a lot of easy questions, a lot of difficult questions. Would you rather have easy or difficult?
I'll go for it. Whatever.
Okay. How many times does Jango Fett drop his blaster in Kamino while battling Obi-Wan Kenobi?
Oh my goodness.
I told you they're hard or easy.
How many times does he drop his blaster in the battle? I'm going to say none.
The answer is twice.
Wow. I missed one, man.
There's at least once where I recall the blaster like bounces into like a crevice and he has to retrieve.
And doesn't he drop it the second time when they're fighting on the rooftop?
Yeah, when he kicks him maybe?
Right.
At the very, very end of the fight?
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, good thing we're not keeping a tally on this one, but Fredo's perfect, and Dave and I apparently each have a miss.
No, you missed the Camino
I miss the Camino ones.
All right.
We each have a miss at this point.
Okay. So, you kids can play along. There was one in here, and it's very interesting that who had the call sign of Red 3 in the Death Star run in
Wasn't
A New
that
Hope?
Biggs?
It was Biggs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So, but what's interesting about that is that the X-Wing that came out in 1978 or whatever, when they released the toy, the X-Wing, has Red 3 on it, and everybody says that's Luke Skywalker's X-Wing. So a lot of people probably miss that correlation. So anyway, I digress again. So anyway, so that's our trivia. And so let's get back into the rise of Skywalker. And we're going to start talking about Palpatine. And apparently that just made my dogs really mad that we're talking about Palpatine. Or somebody's invading. Oh, well, Britt will take care of it. So a couple things I just want to say, because basically I think the gist of the conversation we're going to have is, why is he in this movie? Was he needed in this movie? So yeah, we're going to try to make ourselves better than, any of the directors or writers or anything like that and say we know more. But I think one of the things that I think another thing we need to talk about is how he was used in this movie. And one of my big criticisms right off the bat was, and I think it would have been a nice, again, rhyming to the Phantom Menace, because he is the Phantom Menace, Darth Sidious, Emperor Palpatine, Sheev, whatever you want to call him. But if they would have made it a little more ambiguous as to whether or not the Emperor is actually back. Now, the first trailer, you get the Emperor's cackle, and everybody at Celebration went, "Oh my God!"
And then he comes out,
and he came out and he said, "Wrote it again," But anyway, but that didn't mean, even up to the release, talking to our friend Scott, he was like, "You don't know if Emperor is actually going to be back as a person, or if it's going to be a ghost, or if it's just going to be a memory, or what." And I think one of my things, I wish they would have made it more ambiguous until the third act that, yep, there's the Emperor. But instead, in the crawl, it's the dead speaks, and basically the Emperor is back. And then right away, we get the montage of, Kylo going to get the Wayfinder and stuff like that. And then now he's talking to the Emperor face to face. So there's like, what is it? what movie is it from? So it's not ambiguous. It's big. Oh, it's actually from Big Bang Theory. It's not ambiguous. It's biguous. You know, I mean, he's there. So we're like, all right. You know, I think it would have been a little bit more interesting if it would have been, is he back or isn't he back throughout this whole movie?
I think it's a double-edged sword because I think you can do such a thing as bring him back too early, but you could also bring him back too late. And I remember some people talking about it prior to the film, and just like debating like, is that if you bring the Emperor back, how late in the runtime is too late? Because we all kind of know he's back, and we all want to see him. So if they had delayed that gratification into like, I don't know, the last 20 minutes of the film, and it had been like revealed as a big reveal at that point. Look, he's back. Surprise. Well, all the marketing had already told us that he was coming back. So that would have been a gigantic fail.
Well, again, I think you can take the marketing out of it. Let's just, just
you can't actually.
Well, but I mean, in hindsight, yeah, you can't. But I'm saying that if you're going to develop the story, I'm just talking about from the story writing process. Is it more interesting to have him from the get-go, right out the gate? There's the Emperor, without and by the way, a criticism, without any exposition whatsoever.
So how he came back?
It's just we have to, we just have to accept the fact that the Emperor is there. Too bad, so sad. What you saw in Return of the Jedi, me
I
being
agree.
a Star Wars nerd and and everything like that, I could start drawing some conclusions of how this went all to be. But
I agree with Fredo on what he just said. It's like you can't take the marketing out of it because they had to get people into the theaters, right?
The reason I say you can't bring it up is actually because I went looking for the opening crawl, what the actual crawl says, and then found out, okay, so the crawl goes, the dead speak, the galaxy has heard a mysterious broadcast, a threat of revenge in the sinister voice of the late Emperor Palpatine. Do you know where the mysterious broadcast was apparently made? Fortnite, the video game. Apparently, during an event in the video game, they had the Star Wars characters kind of invade the video game. And in the middle of that, there was the broadcast of Emperor Palpatine's voice saying he's coming back to take revenge.
That was
now
like
I'm
in
just
the
mad again. I'm getting mad again.
So when I say marketing couldn't have been taken away, yet.
But again, you could have, in writing this story, you could have still made it, maybe that is, somebody imitating his voice. Maybe it is, recording that he made before he died. Maybe it was, maybe it's a ghost, like I said, but making it a little bit more ambiguous, at least through, I agree with you. You can't just, make it a third act, but I think you probably could.
Would that bait and switch have driven you insane? Because it would have.
But what bait and
made
switch?
me mad.
It's just if you hear the laugh, so he's involved somehow. I mean, when I saw that at Celebration, that didn't tell me that he was going to be a flesh and blood character in the movie. That it just said the Emperor was going to be involved somehow, and so what I'm saying is that when you just bringing him out of the gate, it kind of added to that, herky jerkiness of the movie as well.
Part of me was thinking, we keep referencing George Lucas' famous line of how these movies rhyme with one another. Because Force Awakens, the whole plot is finding Luke Skywalker, is the quest by both the First Order and the Resistance to find the last known Jedi. And so they have to go find the piece of the map, and they have to dissect it, and they have to go try to find them. So in some ways, you could have done something to, Rise of Skywalker does something similar, where they're trying to find the Sith Wayfinder, and they're trying to find the piece of how do they get to Exegol, and how do they stop the Emperor. So there's something similar to it there. I think it doesn't necessarily have to be till the third act. You could have delayed it a bit till the second act, because thinking back of the other characters, I love the idea that Kylo Ren's response to the Emperor might be back is not, "Yay, we got more Sith. I can learn from my grandfather's master. I've idolized Darth Vader. This is the guy I want to be." His response is, "Oh no, you're coming to take what I've got, and I gotta fight you." And that's an interesting response from a villain for me. because it's not the we're all Sith, go Team Sith. It's very much a rejection of a potential threat to him.
Yeah, but he didn't hold on to that very long, because then it was just pretty soon the Emperor just said,
"Is in charge."
Go kill the scavenger.
From a certain point of view, I think like we talked about last episode a little bit about how Ben either worked or didn't work for us in this movie, and for me it worked because I went. First viewing, I'm like, what's going on here? Second viewing, I watched it with the perspective of Ben's intending to betray him from the very moment that he meets him. And he sees Rey as his path. And again, you can interpret that as being romantic interest, or you can see it as being him. She's the person that I would rather rule with or utilize in this scenario rather than this crazy undead being who's like in front of me, like speaking zombie nonsense.
Because watching the movie the second time, the first thing that kind of struck me is when Palpatine's talking to Kylo Ren, and his primary command is to kill Rey. And I'm like, wait a minute, why are you telling him to kill Rey if your ultimate goal requires Rey? Why were you telling? And then I started thinking, is this him manipulating Kylo Ren?
Or
is he?
Probably most certainly is.
But it's the idea of, I know you're not going to kill her. In fact, you're going to go out of your way to try to do something to draw her to your side, bringing her here.
So we've taken us on a tangent here, because now I'm going to start, going over, because I think part of the things we want to talk about Palpatine was how was he used, and did he need to be in, and we'll get to that question, did he need to be in this, movie. But here's one of my problems. Okay, so, and again, there was a lot of retconning done, from Last Jedi to, Rise of Skywalker. So Snoke was Palpatine's voice, right? And spirit, basically, right? If I'm getting that right, because Snoke, we saw a couple Snokes in formaldehyde. But my problem there is that, and it was one of my problems in The Last Jedi, it was how did Snoke not know that Kylo was going to kill him? Because even the Emperor in Return of the Jedi said, you want to kill me, don't you? Yeah, I can tell you want to kill me. He knew everything. He was, and so how did he not know that Kylo was going to slice him in half? Was he that easily duped that, and it's Kylo that good to say, I'm just turning a lightsaber and I'm going to go after my enemy, the air quotes here. And then we get to, the Rise of Skywalker, and he's saying, I'm wondering if you're going to betray me, and the Emperor knew that, you're right. The Emperor knew that Kylo Ren had it in his mind that I'm going to betray the Emperor. So he's manipulating him.
Perhaps the Snoke experience informed that, though, that knowledge. Like, he knew at that point, after what happened in Last Jedi, that Ben would be committed to this connection that he had with Rey over everything else.
Yeah.
But I guess two things. First of all, I was thinking as I see the two Snokes and formaldehyde, it's like, how bad must those be if the creepy looking guy that we eventually got is the actual guy who made it out? Jeez, I mean, is the cloning technology
really
that
screwed
awful?
Up with these two? Yeah.
I mean, God, what were they missing? Were they missing limbs? Was something wrong?
All right, so let's.
But I was gonna say the other thing that I was kind of thinking is, I don't necessarily know that he's manipulating. I don't think it's kind of like a meat puppet that Palpatine is manipulating. I thought it was, okay, he created this being to kind of act as him, where without him leaving Exegol. So Snoke was out doing what he's supposed to be doing, because Palpatine says, I'm the voice in your head. So clearly he had command of some kind, but he might also gone like, look, Snoke is disposable to me. I got vat full of the dude. I can make more of him anytime I want. So losing him, it might have been more important for him to see where Kylo goes. Again, all of this is unsaid, and it's all presumptions on my part. But
to all the 40-year-olds out there, and anybody else who are like really losing their minds over the fact that there are loopholes in this movie. Oh, yeah. There are loopholes throughout the entire Star Wars saga. Get over yourself, including myself. I mean, it's one of those things. But one of the things, and this is a topic for another day. But I wonder if let's write in some of these loopholes so that we can write more books and comic books and make more money. You know, that's the cynical part of me. But anyway, so let's get into this.
Why is he here?
Actually, I'm not why. Well, maybe instead of why is he here, could The Rise of Skywalker have existed as a movie without Palpatine? Snoke is dead. Can you move on to, and we can get into what Chris Terrio said here in a minute, but can you move on to a movie? Can you see a movie? Let's forget it for a second. Let's forget about what Chris Terrio said, the writer of The Rise of Skywalker. Can you write a movie that gets Kylo Ren redeemed, Rey winning overall, without the Emperor being involved in this movie?
I have ideas, but if
Fredo
wants to go first.
Oh no, I'll let you go first.
Okay. Okay, so just to give everybody background, George Lucas created this thing that he called the Rule of Two, right? And it was basically a way of him explaining away a storytelling device, which is what we saw throughout the end of Return of the Jedi, which was, if there's a way to turn Darth Vader and to add complexity to that character and redeem him ultimately, you need a bigger bad. You need somebody else there that would allow him to make that choice, that eventual decision. And so when you come around, 20 years later or so, when we have Phantom Menace come along, he explicitly wrote that into his movie at that point. There's a rule of two with the Sith. The Sith have two members because they're always going to betray each other if they ever exceed that number, because you have a master and apprentice. If the number ever exceeds that point, it'll never work because they'll just try to be killing each other. Is a convenient way to explain that storytelling necessity that you have, where if you want your villain to have that level of complexity and that ability to eventually turn or come back to the light or what have you, you have to have the big bad in place. So knowing all of that, coming into Rise of Skywalker, there was no big bad, which meant there was no opportunity to redeem Kylo Ren. And so if you as a storyteller decide that that's the story that we need to tell, and that's the story that maybe in a larger way this saga is all about, the redemption of these characters, okay, we're going to need a big bad. And there's no more logical choice within the Star Wars universe, I think, at this point, coming into this story, than Palpatine. And again, that would be my take on the situation.
I guess my short answer would be, in order to get what they decided they needed to have, meaning the redemption of Ben Solo, you could not have had this movie without Palpatine. Look at the path that they've laid on for him from Force Awakens. First thing we see is him killing Max von Sydow's character, Lord Santeca, and ordering a whole village exterminated. We see him torture our heroes. We see him kill one of the most beloved characters in movie history. And that's by design. That was J.J. Abrams by design saying, I'm going to make you hate this guy. And then through Last Jedi, again, you keep seeing all the depths and all the stuff that he's willing and able to do. And then what's interesting, you see the one thing he's not willing to do. He was willing to kill Dad, not willing to touch Mom's hair. He's not willing to hurt Leia. That's the one bridge that kind of keeps him connected to the light.
And then eventually Rey.
Right. But what's interesting is that, at first he's okay with killing Rey. Like when he first meets her, she means nothing to him.
Yep.
And then she beats him and he wants to find her and kind of turn her towards the darkness or, get his revenge on her. The one character that we see that he has a problem distancing himself from, so to speak, is Leia, his mother. But I think the way that they left it at the end of Last Jedi, it's clearly meant for us to think, oh, he's going to be the big bad now. He's removed all other name villains. He's emasculated General Hux. He's the guy in charge. He's going to be the guy who's in power. And what does this movie do? It immediately reintroduces the biggest bad of them all. It immediately reintroduces more Imperial machinery officers in the form of Richard Grant's General Pride. And you only do that because you say, okay, I need to have some big villain that we beat, and it can't be Kylo Ren anymore.
So what if? And I agree with both of you. Just so you know, I agree with both of you. It goes back to Ryan Johnson wrote him into a corner. I mean, he had to figure out some way out of it. If you ever want more of my thoughts on this, corner me in a bar and I'll tell you about when I was a band director and make different drill writing, metaphors and things like that. But there are times I think they wrote him into a corner. There was no way out of it. But what if the baddie for The Rise of Skywalker was Darth Plagueis?
It could have been true.
It wouldn't have sold as many tickets.
Well, I mean,
it might have sold tickets, but here's the thing.
I mean, you're not going to get the cackle to, I think
drive people nuts at Celebration, right?
I think people would have gone to The Rise of Skywalker. Yeah, I don't think people went because they, the Emperor was going to be in it. I see your point though, that's familiar, but I think if you would have said Darth Plagueis, then it would have been a little bit easier for it, because all you had to say was, hey, the Emperor's former boss. He thought he killed me, but I had figured out how to gain immortality. He did not. Wouldn't have that made the prequel fans just wet their pants? And and it would have been similar to we saw the Emperor in The Empire Strikes Back, but only for a couple seconds, and then he was basically a character in Return of the Jedi. So I think you could have then started the movie off with here's Darth Plagueis, and it would have been less of a smack to the face than Palpatine.
My guess is that these conversations occurred in the writers' room
at
some point.
I wonder if it did. I honestly wonder if it did, because it comes to the point that you said earlier. It's like, were they under a time crunch? And it was like, what do we do? I just think it would have been an interesting way to link everything together.
It would have been interesting, because here's what it does. It creates a dynamic. You're going to say the Emperor's former master that he betrayed. You could have even said something along the lines of, he's the one who's been trying to get back power. The reason you've never seen him is because he's been stuck on this planet trying to heal himself up, regather his power, so to speak. You could have even said that he's the one from whom Rey extends from, that he comes, everything you gave to Palpatine, you can give to Plagueis. I think the reason, number one, you bring Palpatine back because he's somebody that everybody knows. Even the most casual fans knows who the Emperor is, especially after the prequels. And number two, because you want to have Ian McDiarmid in this movie, because he's one of those, less sung heroes who always brings a level of fun to the proceedings.
So did the Emperor? We all knew that he was going to be back somehow. Mm-hmm. Did it pay off for you? That's going to get into our next little segment here. But did it pay off for you? Do you think it was done well? Do you think that it was did it live up? I know we said going in with no expectations, but obviously, did it live up to your expectations? Do you think it worked?
Mostly.
Well, you said mostly. So what didn't work?
Okay. His untimely end. Everything that happened in the last 20 minutes of this movie confused me, and maybe that's intentional. Maybe some of that's intentional, but
Mace Windu, just the reason he went down is because he didn't have two lightsabers.
Yeah, right. I mean, if he'd have had two lightsabers, this thing would have ended back in episode 3.
Yeah.
But I get what they were trying to do in some respects throughout that entire sequence at the end, but because the whole point of Return of the Jedi, and we talked about, are you undoing Return of the Jedi? We talked about that in a couple of other constructs, but within the larger message of pacifism and how Luke brings his father back to light through love, and it ultimately prevails through love rather than through, swinging his lightsaber at somebody. I understand the hesitancy to undo that, and if she had defeated Palpatine through some kind of forceful action, it would have, in a way, undone that. And so, I get what they were trying to do. It just was clunky, McClunky.
Well, and I was gonna say, part of the genius or part of the beauty of the character is that he always says, "Look, you strike me and you kill me and I win." It's because that boxes in the hero into having to come up with a new dynamic for how to defeat him that doesn't involve swinging a lightsaber or using a force power or something. You got to find a way to beat him, and sometimes the best way to beat him is by saying, "No, I'm not going to do what you tell me. I'm going to do the exact opposite," which it's obviously how stuff works with him. I thought that for me, Palpatine worked by and large as the movie intended him to work. So I was like, okay, this is what you brought him back for. He's the big bad, and he's been living out in the middle of nowhere, gathering forces and building up the most gigantic, epic fleet ever designed and all that. Okay, so I was like, okay. I do think the last 20 minutes do get clunky in terms of the exposition because it's requiring him to explain a lot. Mm-hmm. He's having to explain the idea of a Force dyad, which is finally giving us the name for the relationship that Kylo and Rey have had since Last Jedi. It's asking us to explain the idea of how he can take that power to bring himself back into some sort of corporeal form.
Which, by the way, if they would have spent more time explaining that dyad thing, mm-hmm. then it would have shot down the Mary Sue people from the internet, because everybody's saying, why does Rey have all these powers right off the bat? And it was when I was listening
to Ben.
Well, it was when I was listening to Now This Is Podcasting, and that's a very spoiler heavy podcast. They're talking about, because every time in The Force Awakens when Rey all of a sudden is like manipulating stormtroopers or doing all these big force heavy stuff, she has been recently in contact with Kylo Ren. So they're, like we've talked about, the yin and yang, they feed off each other's energies.
Right.
And so that would have made a lot of people go, okay, but then there's also, you can just say, she's just powerful, deal with it, but it would have, that whole idea of the dyad, they just kind of dropped it, it was, Kylo mentions it once, I think, and then the Emperor mentions it once, and it's,
well, he mentions it right before he uses its power in order to bring himself back to full health bar, to steal a fighting game terminology. Yeah. It's the idea. So I think when you're getting to the end of the climax of your story, it is not the time to be introducing new terminology or new concepts. Everybody gets... And this is a problem that you do see a lot. But the
villain always monologues.
But this is the problem that you've seen a lot in genre fiction. Whether it's, Marvel, Star Wars, even James Bond got into it a few movies ago with Blofeld. But anyway, it's the idea of the overarching villain has to have a master plan, and he's always been working in the shadows, and here he comes, and he's going to reveal everything to you 5 minutes before the movie's over. And it's like, if you do your work right, all this stuff should have fall into place. You should know going in what a dyad is, what the dynamics of it is. Even if you don't know, okay, Palpatine can suck the power out of that. You could have even said that was his whole plan all along. Like, I needed the both of them here in front of me. But then they can't know that so therefore I'm going to be throwing all these bad guys at them.
The way it was filmed, it looked like it was a surprise to him that he was able to pull that power from them. And I think he even mentioned that in some of the dialogue. And you're like, okay, so you didn't plan for this, but now you're taking advantage of it. Okay, fine. But why are you trying to muddy the waters and trying to introduce all these different concepts right now, like you said?
Because the original plan is he needs Rey there so that she kills him and he can transfer his essence and the essence of all the Sith into her. That is plan one. And then Kylo and Rey are in front of him, and he tries using his powers against them, and he sucks up a little. And there's a close-up of his hands as they become corporeal. That's what's interesting, because at that moment, that's when you get that shot of him going like, oh my God, this seems to be a better plan than the one I had. awesome. And you're like,
They-
okay. Plan B.
He should have said, "It's working. It's working."
Right. But no, but it's the idea of,
Episode 1 throwback. Anakin
Yeah, exactly.
the podcast or the pod racer.
exactly. But it's that idea of, if you're the big bad guy, you can't be switching midstreams at the climax with a different plan. So, like I said, I think you're right. It does get clunky towards the end. That said, bringing him in as the big bad villain for us. If you're gonna need one, he's dead. I mean,
So I've heard you say that it. So what do you think about? Again, I've heard you both say that it's good that it makes sense that he's there in the movie.
mm-hmm.
But what do you think about just, again, from the outset, saying that there's no gray area? The Emperor is there. Do you think did that, when you first saw that, did you go, all right, cool, or did you go, was it kind of McClunky there as well?
At first I thought, okay, they're gonna drag this out a bit. So within 5 minutes, when Kylo Ren is making it to Exegol and you're getting a scene with him, you're like, okay.
Yeah, that set. I mean, that kind of knocked me off my seat a little bit. I was like, well, that's interesting that we're making this right off the bat.
Right.
I just thought that was
because, like I was
goofy.
saying, part of me was thinking that they were gonna go with that dynamic of Kylo Ren is still trying to keep control of the First Order. Maybe you would have had some shots of some of the First Order officers, kind of having doubts about him when the Emperor's out there. Creating a dynamic where he's losing power, or any kind. You could have drawn it any number of ways, but they clearly went to, nope, we're going right back to the old method that works. We have a big bad who's in charge of everybody. Everybody bows to him, and Kylo Ren is his knight.
I suppose it kind of mirrors Return of the Jedi right off the bat. I mean, well, within like 15 minutes or anything, he's on the Death Star. But I mean, I don't know. It would have been interesting to me to just keep me hanging for a little bit. That's
the thing. They made certain choices because of where Rian Johnson boxed them in, and they made certain choices because of the kind of story they needed to tell and the pace that they needed to hit in order to meet their runtime.
So Chris Terrio had an interview about why the Emperor was there. Mm-hmm. So anything we want to say about that? I mean,
that they need a big bad?
Well, I mean, I guess what I got out, they needed a big bad. I guess it seems like, I don't know, that whole interview with him is kind of interesting. It's almost like, not apologetic, but
not my fault.
Yeah. It's just,
and you're hearing a lot of that kind of thing now. And like you said before, in the lead up to the movie, it was like, it's satisfying. Let's all say it's satisfying. And now, after it's been released, now you're starting to hear,
tastes great, less filling.
Yeah, and like, oh well, it's not my fault.
He did it. Not nose goes. Yeah.
Which is interesting, and like that shift has been dramatic and fast. I don't necessarily think that they have anything to apologize for with this particular movie. I know that there's certain things that I'm pretty meh on, but it's Star Wars is Star Wars for me. I really did enjoy it.
And that kind of gets into what we're going to talk about next, and I really want. I try to think back to when I was a kid and, Empire Strikes Back was coming out or Return of the Jedi was coming out, and how they kind of, what marketing was like. And marketing is obviously totally different, here in, 2020. But we were being sold on a lot of things, at D23, at Comic-Con, not so much at Celebration. It came out after. First big thing that they were like selling was the Sith Trooper, this red stormtrooper, the Sith Trooper, and it's called a Sith Trooper, and they had this whole display at both of those things of, the different stormtroopers throughout the saga. So that makes me go, this is going to be a big deal.
Nope.
Last 5-10 minutes, maybe how much we have to go. It'd be fun to go back and do I can't wait till this comes out on Blu-ray so you can do the screen time. I mean, I only remember as I'm flashing back in my head like one shot of a Sith trooper.
They had less of a moment than the Snoke's guard did in the last.
The Praetorian guards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, at least they had a fight. These guys had a couple of shots and that's it. Well, actually I think the jetpack stormtroopers. What's their name? The ones that are chasing them through the desert.
They're basically jetpack stormtroopers.
Yeah, those are the guys that had the most time of any of the stormtroopers that they introduced this time.
But of course, then you go back to Empire Strikes Back, and even the holiday special. It was like I remember, on the back of the action figure card, it's like, here's this next new big character that's coming out in the next Star Wars movie, Boba Fett. Look at this. You need to get this figure, kids. And everybody's like, Boba Fett, yeah. And Boba Fett has a couple minutes of screen time in The Empire Strikes Back. I mean, really, if you go back and look at that as a 46-year-old, that's kind of a nothing burger as well, to steal your
nothing
phrase.
Burger. We were talking about the Knights of Ren.
Well, we'll get to them in a second, but I
was just going to mention, I remember being outside Toys R Us back when they were around in 1999 and in May when all the toys came out. And the biggest toy that was up for sale was the single trooper aerial platform used by the Droid Federation, which if you're not sure about it, it's this guy.
It's in there somewhere.
Yep, yeah. It's this. It was like the biggest toy that was out there. You had all the figures and you had that, and it was like, oh my God, you saw it in the trailer. I wonder what it's gonna be like. It was in the movie for maybe 10 seconds.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he was holding up a picture of the droid that's riding like the little hovercraft, jet ski looking thing.
Yeah.
Right, and that's what it is. And you're like, but back then it's like, oh my goodness, I wonder how this is gonna fit in. Is it relevant? And no.
Constable Zubio, right?
Exactly.
There you go.
Exactly. Star Wars has always been very good about promoting stuff that later on down the line you realize it's not that big a deal. It's minor. Because they got to sell it to you.
So here's a little bit one that we talked about just a second ago, a little bit more major. Let's say the Knights of Ren, because in The Force Awakens, see the Knights of Ren, and everybody wet their pants over. I thought they were cool looking, and I wanted to know more about them, and we didn't get anything of them. And then, The Last Jedi comes out, and there's nothing. Not even a mention. And then it was really, it was thrown out there that the Knights of Ren are coming back to Star Wars. And everybody like, yeah. And it is kind of like, it's like when you light off that bottle rocket and it like goes about a foot and then goes.
Right, because you see them in the movie and they act as bodyguards and they act as the hunting dog, so to speak, of Kylo Ren. But you get to know nothing about it. And this is usually the hard part of introducing new elements at the end of a trilogy. You don't really have a whole lot of time to get that information.
So let's get into, we talked about leave your expectations at the door, but what were your expectations for the Knights of Ren? I was kind of expecting them to be force wielding. I was expecting them to
Fallen
be
Jedi students.
His classmates from the Jedi Temple. So those were my expectations. I was actually expecting them to maybe be a little bit more integral, a little bit more antagonistic. I mean, they're just kind of just tracking people, and
they
then
just stand and look.
And then they tried to beat down Kylo Ren at the end. So I don't know. What were your expectations of the Knights of Ren?
I thought they'd be a redemptive opportunity, I guess would be how I would phrase it for Kylo.
Which they kind of
and
were.
They kind of were ultimately.
They turned on him quick, didn't they?
Yeah, they really did. And I think that was Palpatine's doing it at some point.
Well, that was the other Kevin Smith, thing. He said now that Ben Solo's wearing a Gap sweater, it makes him all good. I mean, how did they know that he was
no longer the master of the Knights of Ren?
Because he wasn't wearing the mask, or he wasn't wearing the
Oh well, Palpatine suit? Had a moment of dialogue too, where he was kind of like, "I'm in charge officially now," or it was something like that late in the movie, and I'm like, okay, well now Ben's now persona non grata, and I had thought that moment would come earlier in the movie. The Knights of Ren weren't useful to the story. They were more clutter. Now,
They're action figures.
yeah. So I figured here's an opportunity for him to either turn over another leaf or show that he's fallen out of favor. And it was essentially both. But I thought that would happen much earlier in the movie.
See, so rewind. Let's go back. Let's rewrite The Last Jedi. You know, Rian Johnson creates these Praetorian Guards, you know, these people that all pretty much look the same and have different weapons. Why not, if JJ has already created the Knights of Ren, why not repurpose them, you know?
He said he didn't have a moment big enough for them.
Well, but what I'm saying is instead of the Praetorian Guards, use the Knights of Ren there.
He had said he didn't want to use the Knights of Ren in that moment because they were going to get wiped out in like 45 seconds. And so he thought the Knights of Ren were a bigger...
But I'll kill Snoke off, you know? I mean, so that's...
I mean, I agreed with the decision at the time, but then ultimately in the third film, the same thing happens.
Yeah, they get paid off for nothing.
Yeah.
Well, and here's the problem. It's the decision to not make them characters hurts them, and in some ways hurts Kylo Ren's redemptive arc. Because it would have been interesting to hear... The only times you hear Kylo speak are either when he's trying to convert Rey to the dark side, when he's bossing First Order officers around, or when he's talking to Palpatine, or when he's having some sort of inner monologue. That's it. You never get to hear anybody talk to him at his level. It would have been really interesting and dynamic, particularly in that scene when they're all gathered around as they're refashioning his old mask, to hear them talk, to kind of hear them all, you know, their interactions with him. Because then when they turn against him and they're fighting, it would have been an interesting and dynamic moment for both him to show his shift and for them to see how he's no longer one of them.
Or even after the fact, too.
Right.
Because you saw that with Finn, where he had this interaction with the Stormtrooper after he had turned.
When he was traitor!
Traitor! You know, and that was a powerful moment. And then, of course, everything that he did with Phasma. And again, we didn't get enough of that. That's a common refrain from this sequel trilogy, I think. But... it's still a lot. It worked a lot more,
and I think again it goes back to this is totally different than the other two trilogies, in that they had these classic characters along with a bunch of new characters, and I think they should have been done with the classic characters quicker. That it should have been that to me it was always, you know, a way to get us invested in these new characters, and then once we're cool with that, they should have been off on the distance, you know, have Kylo kill Han Solo, and, you know, Luke Skywalker becomes a Force ghost somehow, and Princess Leia is like, I'm going under, you know, retiring, you know, however you want to do that. But I think because they're balancing both of those, then it becomes like, how do we make, you know, get the new stuff with the old stuff?
To your point, like, why did we need Leia? And I get the storytelling reason for this movie was she's going to be the one that brings Kylo back. For me, it would be more interesting if he just chose to do it on his own, and it didn't have anything to do with Leia or some sort of Force connection or whatever. It was just him making the right choice. And
I agree with you. But I think that's going to be another discussion for us. Is that, you know, did they how they did with dealing with Leia? Maybe we can talk about this.
Well,
here
Carrie
as well.
had passed away.
Yeah.
You know,
so I guess let's get into.
So
I guess let's get into that. That was one of the things that we were, you know, kind of sold on, is that, you know, they're obviously going to be using Carrie Fisher, you know, in previous
Force
Awakens footage, and she was going to be part of this movie, and it was going to be handled magically, is I think what her brother said, and things like that. So how did that work for you? I mean, actually, I'll say my reaction first of all. I thought for the most part it was great. There were a couple moments where it felt, no pun intended, forced. You know, that it was like they kind of had these lines, and it was like, okay, so we got to figure out something to do there. But for the most part, it was great. And I thought how they handled her death was wonderful. I mean, just...
It was nice. And again, I'd say You could have had that scene occur a movie ago.
But again, getting to your previous point, sorry to interrupt
Yeah.
you, your previous point, the fact that it was the mother's love, the mother sacrificing herself for her son. I mean that mirrors Return of the Jedi. That's Anakin, sacrificing himself. Leia didn't need any redemption, but it was about parental sacrifice for for the kid.
Can I ask, did you understand what was happening with her when she went to Leia, during the battle between Kylo and Rey, when Leia feels it in the Force and Maz Kanata goes, "Oh, this is her last." And
well, she said Leia now knows what she needs to do, and a little bit yes, because we had already been introduced to that transmitting of life force.
No, but did you understand what? Yeah, but did you get that? That's what Leia was doing? Because I didn't.
It didn't confuse me. I didn't go, aha, that's what she's doing. But it was like, all right, yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That she was basically transmitting all of herself into which then, makes you wonder. That gets into all the things that Kylo, or let's say all the things that Ben was doing when he started wearing the Gap sweater.
Mm-hmm.
Was that Ben or was it Leia?
Well, I think it's Ben.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
I mean, put it this way: if it's Leia, it cheapens everything. Because
well, so I'm saying is like
that was my point. That's why you could have written that all out, and like she didn't necessarily need to be there. Now, to your question, I think it was fine.
Mm-hmm.
It was a little bit of that whole uncanny valley thing going on, like with Rogue One and Tarkin, where you're like, your brain is telling you, this person's not actually here talking to these other people. I know this. How do I accept this?
So again, it will be interesting to show this movie to somebody who
didn't know that.
Doesn't know that this movie was made.
I think on second and third viewing, etc., it smooths out.
It does.
You're not worried about it at that point.
I will say first of all, as for what we got in the movie, I thought it was fine. I thought they handled it well. I didn't understand what was going on with Leia when she was transferring her life to Ben, but I thought that they handled it. Basically, I love the scene with her training Rey. The idea of her being her master was awesome, and I love that as a concept. And I understand, and I think this is my second point. I think they were really hemmed in by the fact that she passed away. They have made a big deal of the fact that Episode 7 was a movie featuring Han, and Episode 8 was a movie featuring Luke. Episode 9 is going to be all about Leia. This is Leia's movie. And then she passes away before they even get started filming the damn thing.
And I agree with you, Aaron. That was probably a mistake.
Yeah, to sell that.
To sell it in that way.
Instead of putting them all three in Episode 7.
And again, the larger point here, and I think we're trending towards the larger point, is that this movie's overstuffed.
It is.
There's too many characters, but we're gonna talk more about.
So let's talk about another one. So in when I was at Celebration, they brought out the panel. Naomi Aki was on stage, and so it was Janna, this new character that we're going to be getting, and it's not like new character, Dominic Monaghan, whatever his role was. I mean, there's a really well-known actor that you could have brought out on stage, but they chose Naomi Aki, and here's Janna. And so we saw some pictures then, in Vanity Fair of her riding a horse and shooting a bow and arrow, and we're like, so again, part of the marketing, we're like, this person's going to be really cool. And we do learn that she was a stormtrooper, that she was taken from her family, and I guess I think it'll be fun to do this in an episode when we get the book. The Visual Dictionary apparently says that Lando had a daughter that was kidnapped by the First Order when she was 2. And if you look at Janna's entry and you do the math, that it kind of lines up that perhaps Janna and Lando are related, that Janna is Lando's daughter. It's not said explicitly, but it's hinted towards.
Yeah, there's a meaningful look late in the movie.
Well, that scene was just that was another moment where I just went, huh? When he turns and says, what's your story or something like that, and she's like, I don't know. He's like, well, let's find out. It's like, what? You know, I was
why?
like,
I mean, this is the last moment you're gonna see of these characters. Why
Right.
put that there?
right. And it's like, so what is episode 10 going to be, you
Finding
know,
all the kids, finding
you
all the
know,
parents.
yeah, I don't know. It just seemed like it was goofy. And
Did the stuff with Finn work though?
I thought it was
thought it did.
interesting because it was that connection. Finn's always been looking for, belonging and connection, and to find somebody who was, honestly, I thought we were going to go down the road when she said, yeah, I was kidnapped and, made a stormtrooper as well, that it was brother and sister,
Well,
which
because
could still be, maybe, I don't know.
well, because what's interesting is she says that her entire squadron defected as one when they felt something calling to them, and he said he names it, it's the Force, which I was like, okay, so it's interesting that you have Force sensitive kids getting called out of whatever brainwashing the First Order did to them.
I hadn't thought about that because that's been a running storyline in the Clone Wars and in Rebels about the Emperor getting Force-sensitive kids and to formulate, some sort of Sith army or whatever like that. So
Right.
would it make sense if he knows that if they,
Instead of wiping them out,
if Finn is Force-sensitive, let's kidnap him and make
Turn
him a
into a
stormtrooper. If Janna is Force sensitive and all the people she's around, let's get them and make them stormtroopers, and maybe that leads up to the Sith trooper. I don't know. I hadn't thought about that.
But it's that idea of, okay, so you establish a connection between both their past and their dynamic for why they left the First Order, escaped from the First Order. So all of a sudden you're like, okay, there's something there, and this is one of those things where we're talking about how stuffed this movie is. It's missing a lot of these small beats, those moments where characters can just express themselves.
But see, here's my deal. I still, if we're not messing around so much with in the first 1.5 acts, I mean, you could just very easily in the crawl say that they've found the Wayfinder to find the Emperor. If you're going to say the Emperor's back, then we don't need to dink around going hunting for the Wayfinder. So all that time, now we need Pisana a little bit to find Lando,
right?
Which we'll talk about Lando here in a minute. But if we're not spending all this time with all this junk in the first act and a half, you could have gotten to Endor quicker and had a little bit more time. It's again my criticism of The Last Jedi. We spend so much time in space. You could have gotten to Crate a lot earlier, and then that would have opened up
the dynamics.
Well, you would have opened up a little bit more space for some of the storylines that were missing, some of those beats that you're talking about.
Right.
So, Janna, I thought was better utilized than Zori Bliss, which we'll talk about too. I mean,
I'll disagree because I really enjoyed Zori.
Well, I didn't say I
Yeah.
didn't enjoy her, but I think we got a little bit more of where, what Janna is and where she came from and how she had more to do in this, and I was more emotionally invested in her than Zori Bliss. So,
but is that a problem because she's got the helmet on, or is it?
No, I think
or is it because she only relates to Poe? Like you don't get to learn everything you learn about her has to do.
No, I think
as
it's
a relation
because
to Poe.
I think it's because you get 5 minutes, and
It's
then
similar dynamic though. You're introduced to this new character, and you get maybe 5-ish minutes with her. You learn a little bit more about how she relates to
one of the
leads, and then let's abandon her.
well,
until the final.
Okay. So let's transition, I suppose, into Zori Bliss since we're talking about that, because that was another one. Here's Kerry Russell is going to be in this movie, and actually, a lot of people, I would have dug this if Kerry Russell would have been a Knight of Ren. There was some people that were like, I hope she's going to be a Knight of Ren. I hope she's evil. I hope she's like.
She could have carried that very
she could have,
easily.
big
Her
time.
voice was like, again, the reason the character as written worked for me, as portrayed in this movie, was that I really responded to her because she had a gravitas to her. And obviously the way that she and Poe interacted, you could have transferred that onto Kylo easily.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we get obviously the fireworks are still going. We get in the Vanity Fair, we find out that she's going to be this. I guess she's a bounty hunter. And she said, "I've got this killer costume," and blah 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 blah, and it was awkward. I thought her, and again, I like the character. I'm just being critical, trying not to be a jerk, but the entrance of her character, it seemed, kind of awkward. And again, but we only had like about 5 minutes.
Not given enough time.
Not given enough time. And at the end of the movie, when she comes back, like I was saying off air, the only thing that I was happy about is that Babu Frick is still alive, because, they waste, they blow up Kijimi. So that's the second time we thought Chewbacca died, and now we thought everybody on Kijimi dies. But Babu Frick was alive. That was the only thing I felt good about. I didn't care that Zori Bliss was back to help, save the day.
I did love the little moment between her and Poe towards the end when, they see each other and he kind of waves to her and then kind of throws her a look and she just shakes her head, and he's like, okay.
No, I give you that was good, but
that's just it. That's not a character. That's just a moment, and I think that's part of the problem that you're running into in this movie is that outside of our leads, and by that I mean Rey, Finn, Poe. See how easy it is to say? And Kylo Ren.
It's just as easy as Narvez.
Exactly. So outside of our three heroes and our main villain, everybody else is just getting snippets of time. It's just getting moments. Everybody's, and normally that's going to happen because, hey, the leads will take the majority of the time, but it does a disservice to all these other characters that you're trying to establish or establishing.
Yeah, and all right, so
you could take this in a lot of directions at this point in terms of characters not getting enough time. We talked about R2-D2. There's not a lot for him to do in this movie.
There wasn't really a lot to do. I was saying off air, there wasn't really a lot to do for him to do in this sequel trilogy. Yeah. He's sidelined for most of the Force Awakens until it's time for him to reveal where Luke is. He's sidelined for the bulk of Last Jedi until it's time for him to kind of give a kick to Luke in the backside by playing the Leia video, and he's sidelined for it here until it's time to dump all the old memories of C-3PO back into him.
Of course, really, there's not much for BB-8 to do in this movie except for just look cute.
He had that moment where he fell under the tree that she'd sliced early on.
And they argue, and it causes Rey and Poe to argue. Most of the stuff he does is with Dio, the new droid.
So, okay, there's another transition. So, in Star Wars Celebration, here's our new droid, and they bring out Dio, and Dio is, one wheel and cone head and riding around, and isn't he cute? And again, they're bringing this out, so this is part of their marketing. Like, hey, this is going to make this movie cool. Did Dio pay off?
I mean, some people like them. That's fine.
You know what it reminded me of? You remember BB-9E, the evil role?
BB-8.
BB-8.
Yeah.
Exactly. So he's the BB-8 of this movie. It's okay. We gotta throw something that's cute for the kids that everybody's gonna want to build one up when they go to Galaxy's Edge, and that's it. And
so
Rose is the biggest one, right? I mean, this is the one that people have been complaining about online because of the backlash that the character
and the actress.
And the actress had gotten previously to this point, and so she's essentially fridged in this movie.
Well, let me back up to Dio here real quick, because the only purpose that he serves is to finish up Rey's backstory, to figure out why, how she's linked to the Emperor, basically how to get them to Exegol. Is there any way they could have done that without creating this new little droid that's going to take screen time away from our favorite droids, that we have?
Yeah, I'm sure they probably could have.
You can find it in that data bank, and plug in R2 into the computer. How many times in the original trilogy did R2 just go up to a random computer terminal
and find out everything he needs?
Yeah, exactly. Right. You could have done that, or BB-8 could have done that.
But are you afraid? Or you were speaking to Rose a little bit?
Yeah, no, I was gonna say it's in. We're gonna get into just how little. I mean, and I guess it's kind of surprising because I thought maybe this is just me. When they introduced Rose in Last Jedi, I thought she was gonna follow the same arc, kind of like Lando did, where she was a key component of the second movie. And okay, maybe you won't see her in every aspect in the third movie, but she'll be a key part of it. Here, she doesn't really do much of anything. She's hanging around the base, and she's I don't know, minding the computer.
And again, Chris Terrio does talk about that, how they used her, and there was a lot of footage that was cut. I was kind of looking at the article again, but there was a lot of footage that was cut because it just ended up looking like the Carrie Fisher footage that they had, just it didn't work. So she had a lot more in the movie, but it got cut down. But she was they knew they needed somebody like one of the main characters, if you will. At least, again, this is kind of like a mea culpa, it sounds like, but they needed one of the main characters hovering around Carrie Fisher. And if Poe and Finn and Rey are off doing their thing, otherwise you just got Carrie Fisher there with a bunch of nobody's.
But I guess then the question is, and it's understandable if they cut the footage from the movie, was that vital footage that they cut away from this character? And I get, look, the plot of the story is for Rey to find Exegol, for Poe and Finn to assist her getting to the Emperor. But if you're trying to establish this character's role, I mean, why not just cut her out entirely?
Well, so on a tangent, an interesting article I saw, again, on Star Wars Underworld's website, and I think on Fantha Tracks as well, but the director of Crazy Rich Asians is pitching a Rose Tico series to Disney for Disney Plus.
That'd be fine.
So,
well, the larger point I take away from the Rose Tico controversy, and at this point it kind of is that, because there's been a strong backlash, like, why did you ice this character, basically? And because idiot angry
white man
didn't like this character. Is that why? You painted yourself into this corner of having to juggle all of these different characters in this movie by not making any choices to clear the slate, so to speak. And so now you've got to make a little time for everybody. Well, we'll remind you that R2-D2's over here with this tiny little task. We'll remind you BB-8's over here with this tiny task. Oh, Rose is still here. For me, it would have been more effective, and we mentioned this off air. I think if you look at a spoiler alert, if you look at how they handled Infinity War and Endgame, and I had my own issues with those movies. Infinity War did something that was really smart, which was they cleared the chessboard, and essentially gave the remaining characters a lot more urgency, but also more screen time. And so you give them a mission, so to speak. We have to avenge these people. We have to try to save these people that are no longer with us. Well, in doing that, you give the people, the characters that are remaining, you give them time to develop, and
sure.
And we get to know more about them, and we get to learn more. And I think, like, that's one of the biggest problems I've had with this movie. And I mentioned that, I think, on the last one, which was just, Chewie is dead. No, he's not. C-3PO, we wiped his mind. No, we didn't. Those kinds of things. When you add it on top of the issues that already exist we have too many characters.
Either go there or don't go there.
Yeah, that's. I would have preferred that so much if he'd have just stuck to it. It's like, okay, and Chewie's the last person I'd want to see die in these movies. But you're gonna do it. It's interesting. We get to deal with the grief just like our characters do. We're gonna care more.
Yeah. So we'll do one last thing that was put out there, that this was going to be a big addition to The Rise of Skywalker, and see if it paid off, and that is Lando. Because, again, he was part of the D23 and the celebration stuff, and there's Billy D. Williams, And so we know Lando is going to be part of the Rise of Skywalker. First of all, does it make sense to bring back Lando? Second of all, did it pay off? So I throw that out there.
Does it make sense? Yeah, I mean, you can. Particularly if you're establishing that the Resistance is still kind of needing allies. Well, Leia knows Lando, who knows many good people, many shady people. So it makes sense that you could bring him in. I didn't necessarily go like, okay, so Luke and Lando were on a secret mission chasing this assassin across the galaxy, and this was the last spot, so Lando stay here, or did he go away? Did he have other adventures? So that's the thing. It does. They
Why
don't
is
go
he there? Yeah.
He's there because Leia called him and told him, hey, they're going here. So it makes sense for him to be there, but at the same time, I'm only here to give you this information that I could have called you over and told you on your way, but now I'm here, so here you go, and I'm out.
Send us an email, Lando.
Exactly, and then he shows up at the planet where the Resistance is after Leia's death, and he's agreeing to go on this mission. Like I said, in some ways it kind of works because you love the character and you want to see more of him. At the same time, though, you're like, okay, that's time you could have given to you could have given Rose Lando's mission,
so again,
and it would have worked.
But again, so it gets back to that, what we talked about in the last episode. The word satisfying is that they were satisfying people, but I don't think that meal that they were giving that was satisfying us had much substance.
It's an empty calorie meal.
Yeah, they're sending us dessert rather than a full meal.
It's fast food.
Because it was great seeing Lando. It was fun seeing Lando. So that made 10-year-old Aaron go, "Yee, Lando's back," but it was unnecessary because there's many different ways that you could have gotten them to Pasana and learned about this guy that had the Sith knife or whatever.
Because I always thought that in Last Jedi, when Maz Kanata was sending Rose and Finn to Canto Bight, that they were going to go find Lando. That's what I thought when he said, there's Codebreaker, he's an excellent with the blaster, he does this, does that. I was like, that's Lando. You're bringing him in. And then they didn't, and then, of course, it goes in a different way. And I go like, if you wanted to bring Billy D. Williams into this trilogy, that was the perfect moment right there. Not here.
Well, and one of you guys mentioned it on our break is that what Lando does with Chewie to go, find all the cavalry, that could have been Rose.
Right. I'd seen somebody on YouTube say that, and I thought that would have been an excellent point. If you're having all this footage of Leia with Rose, well, okay, have Leia up.
Who would have the gravitas, though? And I'll defend Lando's inclusion here a little bit. It's like, who would have had the gravitas in the Star Wars universe to recruit everybody? Because we saw in Last Jedi, Leia wasn't able to bring people together. And again, that was a rushed moment. I get the scenarios are slightly different. But if at the end of this movie, you're like, okay, the message actually is we can rally people to our cause.
Maybe Maz Kanata.
Maybe.
She wasn't 1,000 years, to do either. 1,000 years old. Knows a lot of people.
Yeah.
But you're right. I mean, that was a character wasted by Rian Johnson.
I wanted her.
If we want to talk about JJ wasting Rose Tico, Rian Johnson wasted Maz Kanata.
That's fair. Yeah. I wanted to actually see her become Finn's role model because that was a really interesting dynamic that they had in the first movie, and so. For me, anyway, I always kind of felt that Finn was force sensitive, or at least somewhat force sensitive. We can always debate how much. I thought it would be a really interesting thing to have him explore the force through someone like Maz, because we haven't seen that before. We'd only seen the Yoda, Obi-Wan, Jedi role. So
right quick on Lando, the one thing I'll say that kind of took me out just a little bit, and this is just me, every time I heard him talk as they're he and the Chewie are flying on the Falcon, all I kept thinking was the Lego movie. When he shows up, and because that was Billy D. Williams voicing Lego Lando in that movie, and I just kept laughing about it and go like, okay, stop thinking Lego movie.
I have a couple of other things that we were promised in the trailers, and I'm
curious
to know if you guys thought they delivered. Luke's lightsaber. because it had been destroyed in the previous film, but we saw it in the trailers, and it made its return here. And the other one, I guess I'll just hear that.
You know, I understand what Rian Johnson was doing. I thought it was also kind of an unnecessary thing. But however, it's one of those things. I mean, Luke lost his lightsaber in Empire Strikes Back and nobody cried. He came back with a green lightsaber that everybody thought was cool as hell. So I didn't think it necessarily needed to come back. I would have liked to have seen Rey with her own lightsaber at the get-go.
Right.
Well, she got at the
Very
end.
end.
But I would have liked to seen it at the get-go. But it seems to me that, again, that's one of those, everybody likes the Skywalker saber. I mean, I want
the Excalibur of the saga.
I want one, yeah. But
and it was part of the story too, right? Because the two sabers, Luke was very clear. Make sure you bring both sabers to Exegol, and that's how you're gonna ultimately.
See, and that kind of bothered me as well. Not to take anything away from Leia or anything, but we only found out that Leia had a lightsaber like 5 minutes prior, and suddenly that paired with Luke's or Anakin's really is going really it. Again, I'm going to sound like just a jerk here, but I mean, really, that Skywalker saber, that's the entire Skywalker family. That should have been. You shouldn't need a second lightsaber to defeat the Emperor. I don't know. It just seemed that seemed me. I don't know.
I say? I mean,
yeah.
I was gonna say. I thought that it would have been an interesting choice because realistically, I mean, yeah, it would have been an interesting choice for instead of Luke having Leia's lightsaber, for her to have kept it and to have given it to Rey before she sets off, like saying, "Okay, we broke.
That's a good idea.
You and my son shattered my father's lightsaber, but you need one still, and you don't know how to make one because you haven't gotten that far in the summer reading. So here's mine. I put it down. Give her that. I mean, and I know that obviously Carrie Fisher passed away. She can't be around to say it, or even give that voice to Billy. Give that information to Billy Lord.
But they actually used some voiceover artists to that have done like Princess Leia's voices and other things. So they could have. I like that idea.
Just because it would have been powerful for her to say, look, this is something I could not do for my choice, but you can do this.
If she's, if Rey is training with Leia's lightsaber or her own lightsaber or whatever, and before she goes off on her mission, hey, look, kid, I mended, the Skywalker saber. Keep this with you because, the two of them together, will let you, power Grayskull. I don't know. It's just
totally
right. There's many ways you could have done it. I mean, I find it interesting that okay, and maybe getting back around the idea that Rey, after defeating Kylo Ren and finally learning everything about her past, her choice is to do the same thing Luke did: fly to Octo, crash land Kylo's TIE fighter, and then just simply burn it to the ground and go like, I'm gonna end up here. I don't care what anybody else says.
So I'm stealing Kevin Smith's thunder here, but he there's a lot of things in the movie, and talking about that lightsaber is one of them. Rian Johnson has that lightsaber split in half, and J.J. Abrams like, no, screw you, I'm gonna mend it. Smashes Kylo Ren's helmet, and then the first thing you see is he glues it back together. Snoke is sliced in half. I'm going to put two of them in formaldehyde jars. Luke Skywalker throws the lightsaber the first time he gets it, and then when we go back to Octo, he catches it and says a lightsaber should be treated, with more respect. There does seem to be a lot of elements in there where it's like, you could see JJ just kind of going, do that, I'll do this, That's why I want to see them on stage.
A celebration.
I want to see them on stage and somebody asking them about this, because, and I don't care that there's, I think it builds interest, but I think it also, and this is again the tangent. I think Lucasfilm is not as focused as it once was,
or it should be.
Yeah, I mean, because it's like, it goes back to what we were talking about
But
earlier.
I will say that moment where Luke catches the lightsaber and says that line, I loved it because it played off of that initial moment. Because it's clearly calling back to The Last Jedi and Luke dismissing it.
Yeah, and Luke
And
having
of course,
learned something.
Well,
yeah.
of course, and he learned something, but it's also that idea of he's recognizing where Rey is. It's the idea of a master knowing, okay, when she's telling him all this stuff and he says, no, I came here out of fear, which is the same thing you're doing. And then helping, he's still teaching her. He's still being a master, a sensei, so to speak, to her. Just, okay, you're making the same mistake I did. Don't do that, kid. Go out and do. And I still love the fact that he still puts it on her. Says, look, you can take all this on if you want to, but I can't help you. This is on you. But that aspect of calling back to the earlier movie and kind of juxtaposing where Luke was, all I kept thinking of is, as I see Mark Hamill, it's like, well, of course he ended up a burnout, long-haired hippie, living out in a van out in the middle of the desert. That's what Luke Skywalker would have ended up doing. So seeing that guy now, kind of sort of having accepted his mistakes is good.
Yeah.
So another thing.
The last big promise that I got from the trailers was Endor and Death Star 2. And I'm just curious, like, if you guys felt like that delivered.
That just has confused everybody. And listening
they call it they call it in the Endor system, but it's not Endor. It's
well,
not the Force moon.
So it makes sense that first of all, let me back off. Have you ever seen? I guess Robot Chicken did it, but then also there was also a little animated thing where, all the Ewok, Death Star blows up and all the Ewoks are dancing around, and then all of a sudden all the chunks of Death Star is falling on them, and it's just catastrophic. I thought that was kind of funny.
And then it kind of got to a point that I was thinking of, as mentioned off air, just the idea of, in the final battle after the final order is defeated, all of a sudden all the Star Destroyers start falling out of the sky, and I'm like, okay, should we get out of the way here? Is that not gonna do damage to the planet? Maybe not blow up planets, but if you're standing underneath where that's falling, goodbye.
So here's the thing that makes everybody confused, because, and I saw this just recently. They said, Endor is the planet,
the gas giant,
and the Ewoks live on the forest moon. We all just call it Endor. So I think our expectations were, when we're going to Endor, we're going to see a bunch of Ewoks. We're going to be on the forest. And that's when people saw the ocean and grass. They were like, what? But, of course, I'm thinking, only in Star Wars does a planet have a single biome.
Correct.
But it's, let's see here. I remember, it's like almost everything in the Endor system is called Endor. Like if you look at Wikipedia, I remember somebody saying that, and it's so my expectations were, it makes sense that the Death Star is going to fall on different planets of that system, but my expectation was we're going to the Forest Moon and we're going to see Ewoks and stuff like that. So I don't know if that's what you were going with.
Bit of a disappointment in that sense.
Well, I mean, a little bit, but but again, that would have been, wouldn't be necessary. I mean,
right.
So she's going there to get the Sith Wayfinder, which, first of all, the first one, did you realize that the first one that Kylo got was in the remains of Vader's castle on Mustafar?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we made mention of that.
Yeah, that's in the visual dictionary as well, and it's like, like I talked about earlier, so why are there trees? I mean, that was all lava. So again,
that kind of makes sense, though, if you think about it. Vader had one, and Palpatine had one.
Sure. So so we got to go to the.
We got to go right quick.
Yeah.
Is there a problem with the fact that they're calling them Wayfinders, not Jedi holocron or Sith holocrons?
Because I don't think they're necessarily a holocron. I think
they're specific, like just for that.
They're just basically a compass. Yeah. Okay. And I think it was a way to find their way to Exegol, but it could have been information in a holocron. Absolutely. So yeah, there was a little bit, but I don't think it was, I mean, I find it interesting that they decided to put it on a different planet in the Endor system. If you're going to go all fan servicey, then of course it wouldn't be Janna saying, "Hey, stuff's over there." It would have been Wicket going, that's Jawa. Sorry.
But okay, so another thing. Okay, this may be pedantic, and I'll answer your question. The idea of the knife that she pulls out the little piece.
That's a Goonies reference, isn't it?
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. It's like, okay, wait a minute. Okay, did the guy come in and take perfect measurements, and that's how he cut his knife?
By the way, I knew that. I learned that was a Goonies reference. You want to really lay into me? Britt already has chastised me for this. I've never seen Goonies.
What? How?
You're gonna have to rectify that at some point.
Never saw Goonies.
I own Goonies,
but I still understand that was a reference. So
that's the thing. It's like I'm just trying to think. How did you get out of the '80s not seeing Goonies?
It didn't make a lot of sense to me. Just because the daggers presented as some ancient Sith artifact,
right?
it's
no, we made it. We carved it last week.
Yeah, it's 15 years old at max, right?
But in terms of Endor and the Death Star, I think, like I said, it worked more for me once Rey got in there, and she's repeating her act from the start of Force Awakens. She's climbing the wreckage. That moment. Yeah. She is climbing the wreckage of the past to try to fight for the future, but at the same time, it's still all moments like there was a moment when she's walking down this hallway that's tilting to the side and it's full of water, and there's just discarded stormtrooper armor everywhere. And I kept thinking it was just geez, I wonder what they're gonna do with all that.
It makes sense that Wayfinder would be on Death Star 2 because that was the last place that Palpatine was. It wouldn't have been on Coruscant, in his palace or whatever, because that's something he would have kept close.
Mm-hmm. And so did Vader. He kept it at Mustafar.
Yeah.
And so that idea of, the rule of two, the idea they don't trust one another, which leads me to wonder, did Vader ever make it to Exegol?
What I have a bigger problem with, though, with the Wayfinder is that it looked like the flux capacitor when plugged into a TIE fighter or X-Wing.
I think it was a holocron.
Well, they got all the wires connected to it. I'm like, okay, is there a USB? I thought this was a galaxy far, far away. What does this look like out of Radio Shack?
So I just find it really interesting. The whole topic thing we're talking about tonight is just why do you lay these red herrings? Is it to get people like us to start talking about it? I mean, or because that we're like, oh my God, we're going to have Sith troopers. And then you're going to have half the internet that's really ticked off because you only see Sith troopers for 5 minutes. It's like, I'm going to take, okay, kids, I'm going to take you to, Disneyland, but we only get to go for, an hour.
I'm going to take you to Disneyland, but we're just going to drive
up to the front.
We're going to get a drive to the front. We're going to turn right back around. We're going to drive back out.
Or
Disneyland?
Or we're going to go to Disneyland. You only get to go on one ride. And
it's the teacups.
So
it's emblematic of what we've been talking about, I think, which is trying to please everybody, and you kind of end up pleasing nobody in the process.
Yeah. I think hindsight, just write the movie, tell the story. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Tell the story. And I think you're right. It was too many things we're trying to get in there that, I really dug Janna, but when you come down to, it's again, another thing I used to talk with when you're working with teachers on lesson design, and all the things that a teacher wants to tell their students. There's tons of stuff, but at the end of the day, you have to decide, is it nice to have or is it necessary? And that's a tough thing for people to deal with. That this little bit of information I want to give you is really nice to have. And I think it's really important, but it's not necessary to this lesson. Mm-hmm. So, and I think JJ took all of these nice to have things and crammed them into this lesson, when he probably, even as much as I complain about the summer reading, he should have, these things are nice to have, but I'll let somebody write a book about that, or I'll let somebody do a comic book about that, or I'll let somebody explain that in the visual dictionary. So your point is well taken, is that they just cram too much junk into here. Now, that being said, let's remind everybody, really like the movie. It's fun. but you can't really go to the bathroom.
Yeah, you're not.
I
Yeah,
mean,
you better
as,
not.
As it's a good thing that you went to the bathroom on the second viewing and not the first. So
If anything, this discussion's a critique of the marketing more than it is of the actual film itself, because we're talking about things that we were shown and whether they delivered, and in a lot of the cases they didn't. And that was on them. They chose to reveal those things and chose to promote those things.
And I always think there's a fine line because unlike, say, Harry Potter or Lord of the Rings or most other major genre properties, Star Wars gets the benefit of you do not know what this episode story is going to be. Everybody's going to walk in and they're going to see it and they're not going to know what's in there because it's not an adaptation. This is not a reimagining. This is not they're sequels, so they're continuations. It's not even a true sequel in sense because they're not repeating every beat per se. They're making it rhyme, but it's unique. Planets by and large are going to be different. Characters are going to be new, so they get that advantage. The disadvantage of that is you have to convince the audience to come back every time. So sometimes the problem is you do end up having to show a little bit. How much of that do you show? How much of it do you does it hurt? I mean, does it help the movie that that walking in that Palpatine is there? Imagine if you had no idea that Palpatine was involved in this and the very first thing is the dead speak, here comes Emperor Palpatine. And how would you have reacted to that?
Our friend Scott, that was his criticism of that first trailer. He told Sally not to watch the trailer because he said that's a big spoiler right off the bat. So, because you hear the Emperor's cackle, so I can,
But then we talk about going in with no expectations, but the fact of the matter is a good marketing department knows how to build expectations or manage expectations without getting over. And sometimes you have to give up some information in order for the audience to be cognizant of what they're getting into. Because if you go in there and you had no idea, like if you had did not see a trailer, had read not a thing, you walk in and the first things we tell you is Palpatine is back, somebody would have gotten upset about that.
The trailers actually, I heard somebody else say this is a good point, that the trailers really told you nothing about the story.
No.
Right.
And really kind of showed you the same footage over and over again. But, told you nothing about the story. And that was
until the very end. There was a short trailer that revealed that Ben had been hearing voices and that those voices.
There was a little mini. Actually, they took the little mini scene at the start of the movie where he goes to Exegol and he, when Palpatine is talking to him and does that reveal of, oh no, I was the voice inside your head all this time.
Yeah.
But it's important, and that's kind of the dynamic that, we talk about movies as pieces of art. And ultimately, that's what they are. But they're also a product, and that's always been the balance of how do you manage that aspect
Sure.
of we can it's not just here comes Star Wars and everybody gets to have it for free. No, we're trying to get you to buy a ticket. We're trying to get you to buy a toy. We're trying to get you to buy the soundtrack. We need you to support all this because we poured hundreds of millions of dollars into it, so we need that investment back. So they need to know how to sell that to you in order for you to.
Sure. It's radio is not about the music. It's about the advertising.
Exactly. The songs are all about keeping you around so we can sell you tires and whatnot.
Well, way to make me more cynical there, Fredo.
That's what we're here for.
So, cool. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap up?
Just regarding, I was just thinking, regarding what you were saying about Endor and about Kylo, and I was just taken aback to how they did a good job of. This is the movie I think that we've seen the most worlds. Whether I'm talking about being positive.
Attack of the Clones might rival that.
Might be the
Rogue One would be my guess because they're just flying all over the place.
Sure.
True, but in this one we go to a number of different places. Whether you approve of it or whether you don't, they did a good job of giving you different environments, different dynamics, and different places. And I appreciated that because sometimes, it is fun. Yeah, hey, look, we're going to spend the whole first third of this movie in Hoth. And then we're going to spend the whole middle part of this movie in Dagobah. And then we're going to spend the last part in Cloud City. Okay, cool. That's awesome. By the way, did you not like seeing Cloud City? as the Star Destroyer falls behind it.
Okay, we're gonna have to talk about that. Might be in another episode, but I thought it was totally. I mean, well, obviously it was the exact same as Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, the special edition.
It was just unnecessary. It made me go, "Wow, okay."
And then remember you talked about Warwick Davis and looking at Wicked, Wicked, and you got to see him in the movie, and I'm like,
I thought we would see him before that.
Well, and again, that would have been, it would have made much more sense to have him maybe even riding a horse with Jenna. You know, you know what I mean? I mean, if so,
that would have been an interesting dynamic, having the Ewoks with those
former troopers.
Just again, that's it.
Making peace.
You know, and so I guess this makes you wonder how much, you know, how much a director and a story writer goes back and like hindsight is 2020 going, well, of course, George Lucas did that with the special editions, but I mean, you're not going to go change story beats. He changed special effects stuff.
Right.
But I mean, if they went back and went, oh man, yeah, that would have been a better idea. Oh man.
I think a lot of that comes back in that you get so rushed. And again, whether they had another 5 months or another year, it probably would have smoothed some of that stuff out. But you don't have time to think about story when you're like, I got to get this shot right, and I got to make sure that all the extras are getting paid on time. And
but the story should have been right and in the can before you even start to do the shots.
Or
you know
even,
what I mean?
you should have all the elements in the can, and then when you get into the editing room, that's when you can sit down and go, okay, how is this story going to be told?
I think in a perfect world, that's absolutely the case. But we also know that in Hollywood, a lot of the times that doesn't happen.
They were locked into the release date.
Yeah.
And whatever happens, we're putting a movie out on this date. So,
well, in an effort to solve all the problems in the Star Wars universe, we accomplished nothing, you know. But it was a good discussion, and it will make me, you know, again, you get more cynical as you get older. But you know, it makes you watch a trailer a little bit more with skepticism, because there is a lot of stuff that, you know, you're sold and then it doesn't end up in a movie for one reason or another. But
we talked about Solo's marketing being kind of a failure, and I almost feel like this was almost worse in some respects, because it didn't paint a very accurate picture. I feel like the Palpatine reveal, again, like you said, would it have been more effective to have that come in the movie? I understand the decision why you want to sell more tickets, but you know, would it have been more effective for the fans to have that reveal come during the movie itself? I don't know.
Yeah. Well, all right. Well, until next time, this is Dave and Fredo and Aaron signing off from the Who Dat Jedi, and find us on Podbean, Facebook, Twitter, and tell your friends, and hopefully you're enjoying things. So we'll have more Star Wars discussion coming up in a week. So until then, Who Dat?
Who Dat?
Who dat?
McConkey.